We are live. This is episode 83, Meaningful Work, Your Competitive Advantage for Success. I'm super excited to welcome Wes Adams and Tamara Myles, co-authors of Meaningful Work, a topic that I love, and so excited to have the both of you here. As you know, we always ask our guests, the first question we ask is always, what's on your mind? So I'll let you find it out who wants to jump in first and set the tone.
I'll jump in. Hi, thanks so much for having us. One thing that's been on my mind, especially this week, has been transitions, life transitions, but also work transitions. Wes and I were talking earlier about like this week, after Labor Day, it's like the real life work life begins again, and how that affects our motivation, our well-being. What does it mean to go through transitions, and how can we sustain meaning through transitions? Because transitions can be really hard. So that's what I've been thinking about this week.
That's a good one.
Wes, I'm gonna let you jump in and either build on that or add to that.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about that earlier, so definitely on my mind that idea of how do you kind of move from one thing to the next in a graceful, meaningful way. Tamara and I have been working on an article for HBR about AI, and specifically around like what does meaningful work look like in the age of AI, and how are we designing technology intentionally to enable more meaningful work rather than take it away. And so we've been reading a lot about that and doing research and talking to people. And I've been listening to a lot of podcasts on that topic. So that's really been on my mind, and the agency that we have to make a difference in that area.
So I'm going to actually combine those two topics, because I think they combine really well into there's this transition that we're all going through in terms of the changing of technology and so forth. And to your point, AI, there's clearly ways that AI could be used to either make that more meaningful or less meaningful. So I'd be fascinated to hear what are you hearing? What are you seeing? What do you think is going to happen as the technology evolves?
So I think there's a lot of uncertainty still around what will happen and what can happen. And a lot of that depends on how it's designed and incorporated into workplaces, right? And so part of what we're doing is interviewing leaders and researching workplaces that are doing it well, that are positive outliers in incorporating AI, and trying to learn from their case studies and understanding what they're doing well. And some of the research that's emerging on positive examples of that is really around agency and optimism. And that's research from Better Up Labs that's showing that when people feel a sense of agency and optimism about using AI at work, they tend to get better results, right? So not thinking like AI is replacing my job or I have no control over it. But when it's incorporated in a way where people are given the right training, the right power, the right agency, really, that's when we see the best results. So that's I'm sure Wes can add a lot. I mean, we're really kind of digging deep into the research right now.
I want to jump in with this, as you're talking, Tamara, the hype that we saw a couple of years ago is similar that we've seen with all the AI hype, whatever. We've been like a year away from having self-driving cars since at least 10 years ago. In fact, I feel like it got further away this year. Not that they don't exist, but that
they're all over Atlanta. They're everywhere here.
Really?
Yeah,
but
everywhere.
They're not in Boston, so it's
no, I don't see them.
But similarly, like last year, it just this sort of feeling of doom. We're all going to be replaced. This year, I feel like has at least started to temper down in as this year has gone on, to the point where it's like, yeah, AI is a tool that we can use, not, it's not necessarily sort of Skynet light where it's coming after our jobs and so forth. And I really do think that I think that that's actually allowed people to start seeing its value I'm throwing that out there as a, what do you agree with that observation, or do you think I'm just being optimistic and it's still coming from my job?
Well, I don't know if you guys listen to Center for Humane Technologies podcast. It's excellent. If you don't, everyone should be listening to it. It's called Your Undivided Attention, and they really go deep on this stuff and AI design and the risks and the opportunities. And I think, a lot of what I've learned from their research and what they're talking about. But yeah, I mean, I think there is we saw, I think last week, MIT, or 2 weeks ago, MIT released a study showing that 95% of like AI interventions in companies weren't paying off, right? And that was largely due to resistance and, failed adoption or failed use of the tools and stuff like that. And so I think we're, from the perspective of using these things successfully, we really do have to think about how we're designing them, how we're involving people in the design who aren't just technologists, right? How about the people that are using these things? How about the people that are thinking, subject matter experts, that sort of thing, and bringing people into the process of designing and implementing those things. And I think there are some real concerns about how these things are being trained and developed without a lot of safety features on them. And so I think there's more to look at there as well as we figure out how to use it in workplaces.
So I have a question to that, Wes, and also Tamara brought it up just recently. It's the training within the organizations and embedding and getting the employees on board and creating a momentum. What do you guys see as best practices? It's hard to find in a public space who is doing it well, but somebody must. So do you guys have any interesting examples on that?
I don't know if anybody is actually doing it.
Okay.
Well. I mean, I'll let Tamara jump in, but
there was a study that was published in a Journal of Economics that showed that when AI is used in customer service, for example, not to replace customer service, right? So you're not interacting with an AI as a customer, but the customer service representative is using AI in the moment to help you help the customer. So that's a use case that showed a lot of positive benefits. So the customer service representative felt more empowered, felt that the AI was helpful. The customer got better help, and so it all worked out. And so they did the experiment, and I think so that worked really well. Whereas when they just replaced the customer service with the AI, it didn't work well. And so I think experiments are happening now, and that's what we're trying to understand with the companies that we're interviewing. It's like, where are you experimenting? Where are you seeing positive results? One of the best memes I've seen about incorporating AI was like, why are we giving AI our creative tasks like writing and creating, and then so that we have more time to do laundry and cleaning. We need an AI to do the laundry and cleaning so that we can spend time on the creative work. And I think that's kind of the balance that we'll need to find to keep our agency, keep our optimism, right? Because there's also research that shows cognitive debt. And that's research, I think, from MIT also, that shows that the people who use AI, to do the creative tasks, to write the paper, to write the report, and totally just kind of offloads it to the AI, end up less creative, uses less thinking and less motivated too.
So there's a subtlety there that I've been thinking about recently, which is there is a way there is certainly that problem where you can go too far and let it and sort of outsource everything to it. But I think there's also a creativity shift opportunity. In other words, I can use like a kid's xylophone or something to play music, or I can learn to play guitar, and then I can do something bigger and different because I've learned this more sophisticated skill. Can I learn to use AI in a way that allows me to shift my creativity? So for example, Jeff and I do use AI in our marketing business that we have, and the sort of campaign and the sort of the holistic view of like, this is how we're presenting the brand in et cetera, becomes a more creative task rather than I'm constantly focused on writing copy and then getting it approved, et cetera. I'm actually able to focus on, okay, so what's the kind of bigger picture? I can actually move away from that. So just wanted to throw that subtlety out there and get your thoughts on, do you also see it as allowing a shift in where the creativity can sit?
Potentially, yeah. I mean, I think it depends on how you use it, at what point in the process you're bringing it in, and exactly what types of work and how much of it you're offloading to the AI. And I think also what we're not talking about that's really important is, how is that particular AI that you're using designed? Because I think most of us are using off-the-shelf ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude or whatever. And those have inherent design choices that were made that determine the outcome, right? There was a lot, I think you've probably read about, like GPT-4 being very sycophantic and, you know, like telling you what you want to hear because it was trained that way, right? To keep users engaged. That was a design choice that was about bringing people back to using the tool. And because of that, it's leading you in a certain direction, regardless of how you're using it. So, oh, that's a great idea. Like, how about we do this thing that, you know, might be helpful to you? And that really shifts, and that's out of your control, right? That's how the designers develop the software. That really shifts what happens to your brain and what happens to your work. And so I think we need a deeper understanding of how that works.
So I'd like to jump in and actually shift gears a little bit, because we could all, I'm sure, talk about stuff like the whole time. But I would love to hear a little bit. I think I actually know a little bit of the story from talking with Tamara in the past, but would love to hear a little bit about, like, where did this idea of the book come from? What was it that you were seeing? What was the sort of the problem that you were like, this is something we need, and how did that end up coming to life?
So Wes and I met on the first day of grad school, right? At UPenn, we had come in to study applied positive psychology. And we were both very curious about the leader's role in shaping environments where people experience meaning at work. And so in grad school, we were learning all about the research that existed, decades of research on meaningful work, but most of that research was done from the individual perspective. So how can I increase my own meaning at work? How can I find a sense of calling in my career and things like that? And we, based on our own personal experiences, really knew that leaders played a big role. And so we set out to investigate what that role was. And we've been doing this research now for over 5 years, and we, did everything from qualitative study, quantitative study, and all kinds of statistical magic and all of that. But we ended up finding these specific leadership practices that increase meaning at work. And those practices fall under the framework that we created called the 3 C's. And, and it was an exciting finding at this time in life with this new future of work and all the changes that we're going through. And so we decided to write a book about it and help more leaders everywhere create more meaning.
So I want to go back to what you were just talking about a little bit before, Tamara, and you were talking about that meaning of work and positivity and greater engagement stays positive or stays in whatever good and well and ahead of the game if the company manages how AI is applied within the workforce already, right? Now, with the arrival of agentics, there are going to be AI team members, right? So there's going to be human team members and AI team members. So in view of that, how would human team members and AI ones, for that matter, view meaning of work, and how is this going to change with this crazy mixed teams that we're about to experience?
I think I can jump in on that. So I think it would be helpful to first take a step back and frame what we mean when we're talking about meaningful work, because
Yes.
I think people often have some misconceptions about it. So meaningful work, in the way that we define it, is comes from, as Tamara said, the 3 C's: community, contribution, and challenge. These are the 3 sources of meaning that combine to make work meaningful. Community is the sense that you belong in your organization, that you can show up authentically, share your full self and your full ideas. Contribution is understanding how your work matters. And so that could be laddering up to a larger organizational goal, how you're contributing to the company. It could be about how you're contributing to your coworkers or making their lives better. It could be about clients, customers, that sort of thing. But just understanding, connecting the dots between your work and the impact that it's having. And finally, challenge is the individual opportunity to learn and grow and develop. And so these are things that are not restricted to nonprofit jobs or, healthcare jobs or that sort of thing. What we found was that meaning can happen in every job every day if we know where to look, and especially if we have leaders who are using these practices that we found in our research. And so, as we're talking about bringing in AI workers, agentic AI, who will be essentially coworkers with us, I think we need to do that through the lens of the 3 C's, right? You can't have a relationship with an AI coworker, not a real, I guess you can, but, but as we think about community, which is the first piece of meaning, right? We have to make sure that we're really investing in building authentic relationships with the real humans who work at this company, right? It's very easy already for us working remotely to be transactional, right? Oh, we're going to jump on a Teams call, we're going to get down to business and do our thing and go, and forget to say, Eric, like, hey, how was your weekend? Like, what was going on? Tell me about what's happening with your kids. Jeff, I know your son just went to college. Like, would love to hear more about that kind of stuff. That really matters to us. And so I think as we bring in artificial teammates, we have to be careful not to lose that. And I'll let Tamara maybe jump in on the rest.
Yeah, I'll jump in because one of the things I've been really thinking about is the challenge C. And, that one is all about feeling like we're learning and growing. Like we have people in the organization that believe in our potential, that see our strengths, and that give us opportunities to use those strengths, right? And so if we think about this research on the cognitive debt and the lack of motivation when we use AI, I think it directly relates to the fact that when we complete a project where we didn't have to put much effort in, we just created a prompt and then gave it a couple rounds of feedback, but we didn't really learn a lot in the process. I think that's where the sense of demotivation comes in, of like, it's de-energizing, we feel cognitive debt. And so I think if we're thinking through the lens of challenge, and if we have agentic coworkers, how can we maintain this learning and growing? And maybe the agentic coworkers are great at listening in and taking meeting notes and collecting next steps and assigning tasks for people. That's something that, I've been, consulting on productivity for almost 20 years, and it's still like basic building blocks of meetings that are not done properly. Mm-hmm. So if an AI can come and do that well, that's going to help us all perform at our best. And if we're thinking about tasks like that enable our learning and growing and our performance, I think we can use it well.
We have this conversation. I was going to say, we have this ongoing conversation across multiple podcast episodes about this idea of, right now we are sort of in this mode where humans are prompting the AI, and that the real, to the point that you're describing, Tamara, is that maybe the real impact of AI ultimately will be when AI is prompting the humans, right? Like, hey, you could do that, whatever, to your point, like this meeting could be run better, or that interaction could have been, handled differently, or you might want to ask this question or whatever it is, and get the AI not to think for us, but to help us be more effective in the way we interact. I think there's a lot of interesting opportunity there as we sort of see how AI evolves. And right now we're just using it in the most obvious way possible, which is to replace things that we are doing.
I think though that's already happening. You know, I mean, if you look at BetterUp is one of the companies that we've studied closely, and they have an AI coach that's excellent. You know, you can talk to it about, oh, I'm going through this situation, or I have to give this feedback. How should I do that? You can practice with it. It'll give you feedback, and it's very well trained, right? You can even, I don't know if BetterUp's platform can do this, but others can listen in on your meetings and give you feedback afterwards and say, hey, next time, you know, try talking about it like this. But it doesn't know anything that we haven't told it already, right? It doesn't come up with new ideas. It's just an amalgamation of all the things that it's been trained on and told to do. So, you know, I think those very human capabilities, innovation, creativity, resilience, agility, those are things that are going to become even more at a premium than they already are. And those are the things that we need to unlock in people, which requires them to believe that their work matters, right? Meaningful work is the thing that's going to unlock what we need next to succeed.
So speaking of agility and AI, maybe now's a good time to see what AI has to say about it.
So I asked ChatGPT, I always ask this question, I said, give me a set of 10 funny questions for the co-authors of the book, Meaningful Work. It actually it has a lot of really good ones. I usually ask the question, would you like absurd first or thought-provoking first?
Absurd.
Absurd, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've ever had anybody say thought-provoking first? I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
I think
people always want absurd first. Well, all right. I don't know if this is absurd because it had a lot of thought-provoking ones, but this one I just thought this one sort of made me laugh. Did you ever argue over what counts as meaningful? Like, does binge watching count if it inspires you?
I don't know if we've argued. We've had a lot of conversations.
We've
about
debated vigorously about pretty much everything you read in the book.
Yes, pretty much.
Well, so this is similar to, by the way, to the question I was kind of hoping it would ask. Maybe it did. So sorry if I skip it over, but my question to you guys was, do you find the work that you did on Meaningful Work to be meaningful work?
100%. Yes, for sure. Because, you know, if you think about it through the lens of the 3 C's, right? We experience community with each other. Like our relationship strengthened a lot during this process of writing and researching together, but also even the greater community, the clients that we were teaching this to, the leaders that participated in our research. From a contribution standpoint, we have such a clear understanding of the impact that this work has, not only because we hear directly from now readers, but even when we do leadership development training and we get feedback instantly that people are applying these practices. And then challenge was off the charts. I mean, it is hard. It is very hard.
It's a challenge to work with Wes.
Well, it's a challenge to write a book for sure.
Well,
writing a book is challenging.
So it's interesting you bring it up because, and I actually am right in the middle. I just kicked off the process of writing a book with a co-author, which, you know, I wrote a book, the book that's behind me here, but I wrote it by myself. And so it's interesting. It asked this sort of meta question about, which I'm fascinated about. It said, how did you divide the labor? One typing and one pacing dramatically, or both procrastinating?
I think this is I actually use this story when I'm teaching trust in leadership workshops. And I think, you know, at the beginning, we sort of divided up chapters, you know, like I'll take half, you take half. And we each wrote the first draft of most of the chapters. Some of them we collaborated a little bit more on, but I really struggled with one of my chapters. Like I just kept writing it and rewriting it and I couldn't get it right. And I was so afraid that Tamara was going to think I wasn't like keeping up my end of the deal. You know, it's like, it's very motivating to have somebody else who you're accountable to. And I kept hiding that, you know, I was like, I got to figure this out so that I can, you know, show that I'm doing a good job. And at some point I was just like, I can't do this. Like I need help, you know, like it's not it's not working. I'm not able to get through this thing that I've tried to write and rewrite so many times. And Tamara was like, oh, me too. I've been having the same problem with this other chapter.
Let's just drop that chapter.
Yeah.
It's funny that you all see this, because there actually was a question that I didn't ask you that was, what chapter nearly caused you to quit and write solo books called Petty Work and Pointless Work?
All right, so I have a very different angle that I want to bring up because of today, what was in the news today, which is that the employment numbers are dismal for August, and they keep revising. June and July keep getting worse and worse. And so what this
Who's
brings
doing
up
that? We should fire them. We don't
Yeah.
want reports like that.
Well, that's the thing. Like, this is the whitewashed version of this, right?
Right.
So my point being, like, there was a couple of years ago, especially during like the later half of the COVID pandemic, what they were calling the Great Resignation, and people were leaving the jobs, presumably that they didn't feel were very meaningful or were not serving their purposes. And now we're in this position where, there's lots of reasons why people are losing their jobs. There are people are just, I had this conversation recently with a person I used to work with. They're not very happy with their job. And they're like, I was like saying to them, like, yeah, I wouldn't just drop it and quit right now. You got to kind of hang on and figure out, like, whereas 2 years ago, maybe I would have said, yeah, just move on. You'll get a job quickly, whatever it is. I wouldn't say that to somebody right now. And that has to have an impact on people's willingness to, leave, change, insist on that meaningful, the meaningful quality of their work. What are your thoughts, given that the news today and all those implications with respect to meaningful work?
I have so many thoughts. I'm like trying to organize my thoughts to like, where do I start? So I guess the pendulum has swung, right? And the power shifted a lot. Whereas when COVID hit and people were really focused on employee well-being and all of that, which is great, but that's when there were more jobs, people were quitting and people were demanding what they wanted. And now kind of there's a lot less jobs available. The power dynamic has shifted again. And so there's a little bit of that. No, there's always that going on. That said, I will say, there's a lot of research that supports that losing a job, being unemployed, has a significant negative impact on our mental health, on our well-being. And so, our jobs are a big part of our lives. We spend more time working than doing anything else, and it shapes our identity. It's not just a translation of effort into money, right? But it really is about who we are. And so it is important for us to find meaning in our work. And what we find again and again is that meaningful work is a lot less about what we do and a lot more about how we experience what we do. And so if we can experience more community contribution and challenge, and it's not all the time, but it's these moments that matter, moments of connection with somebody, moments when we know we made a difference, moments when we really feel like somebody believed in us. In these moments, the experience of meaning is created, and we can have that in every job. And so for somebody who is struggling right now in a job that maybe feels meaningless, I would say, start looking for those moments. A big part of meaning at work is reflection. So take some time at the end of the day to reflect. And if you're really not finding meaning, create meaning for somebody else. Be the person who connects, who reaches out, who asks somebody the question. Be the person who says thank you. Like, hey, Jeff, thank you so much for taking on that extra assignment. Like, you really made a difference and, allowed us to complete the project on time. Be somebody who sees somebody's strength. Hey, Eric, you're a great interviewer. Thank you so much for asking those challenging, thought-provoking questions. So you can be the person who creates meaning for somebody else. And the beautiful thing then there is that it's reciprocal. When you create meaning for somebody, your work becomes more meaningful too.
I love that. That's such a great point. This idea that I think, and I run into this a lot in the work that I do, is that so many people, especially the junior folks, although it's interesting because it goes all the way up to the top, is feel like they are victims of their work, right? Like work is happening to me, and it's like a lot of what I train on is like, hey, there's a lot more in your control than you think there is. Here's some things that you can control, but you have to actually let go of all the things that you wish you could control first. But it's so fascinating that what your point about, like, you can actually create your own sense of meaning. You don't have to wait for somebody else to create meaning for you. You can essentially say, I'm going to create a better environment just by being a more happy, more positive person in this environment, as opposed to being yet another person who's sort of like, feeling victimized and dragged down and whatever. So
I think it also especially applies at the leadership level, because it is on us to actually create that environment for our teams and for people who work with us, and ultimately understands that we are the culture, right? And it could be a very satisfying moment to know that I did my part today and I contributed to making somebody else work meaningful.
100%. I mean, that's something we found, half of our experience of meaning at work comes directly from what our leaders do or fail to do. So it's a huge, huge opportunity.
I want to jump in on this for a second.
Go ahead.
Yeah, because I'd love to sort of put my consultant hat on for a second, because I think this is a really interesting conversation from the perspective of the employer, right? Oh, we're now in a position where, like, it's an employer's job market, so we don't need to do as much, right? We can pull back. We don't need to offer as much, and people are going to be afraid to leave or whatever. And I think that can be a very detrimental attitude to have, right? You don't want people that are just staying at your organization because they have to, right? Paying people is great. It gets them to show up, right? But it's not going to unlock their best work. The only thing that's going to do that is if they believe that the work they're doing matters. And if you want to be competitive, you need to unlock the best work of everybody that's working for you, especially in an environment where things are tight, right? And so this is when you should be doubling down on, how do I implement these practices? How do I make the most of what I have, of the people that I have on my team, and make them feel like they can bring their best selves and their best work to the table? And so I think it's a business imperative to do this.
100%.
How do you think about the balance, though? And I know this balance doesn't have to be a balance. It could be you get everything, but I think most companies have to sort of balance the meaningful stuff in their corporate goals, right? Particularly if you're a public company, like you got, the stockholders, or, I was trying to build a public benefit company where we were creating data for drug discovery or whatever. And eventually I just ended up having to focus on, like, okay, how are we going to get our next client? How are we going to, execute on the work, which is maybe not that ultimate goal. How should leaders be thinking about balancing that, or redefining a way that they approach their companies so that they can not lose the meaningful thing that drove them to start the company in the first place?
I mean, these aren't mutually exclusive, and it's not like creating meaning is not an adjacent project, right? And in the best case scenario, it's infused in everything that the company does, because you're creating the experience that fosters community, that lets people know how they are contributing, and that are like constantly giving them meaningful challenges that allows them to grow. And so it's not like, okay, let's focus on business outcomes. Okay, today we're going to dedicate 30 minutes to meaning. Like, that doesn't work. Right. But when it's infused in the experience, and I mean, there's a lot of data that shows that meaningful work is a leading indicator for the outcomes that we care about. So when we experience meaning, then we have better engagement, higher productivity, more retention, even our stock performs better. We make more money. And so those this idea of like, how do we balance, like, how do we remain focused on the objectives, but then also pursue meaning? It's like you do it at the same time. You create an experience and an environment and a culture that fosters meaning so that people can be really energized and engaged and passionate about pursuing the goals.
So it's almost like you have to redefine the question. So it's like, how do I think about this shift so that I maintain the meaning rather than putting the two at odds together?
Right.
Just one final thought on that? Yeah, because I think we don't want to conflate meaning and like feeling good all the time, right? That's not where meaning comes from. When we do workshops with people, leadership development programs, one of the first things we usually do is ask people, what's one of the most meaningful experiences you've had in your job, right? A specific story. And I would say on average, about 80% of those are, I had to do this really hard thing that sucked and I wasn't sure I was going to be able to do it, but my team pulled together and we made it happen, right? It wasn't this was like amazing and everything worked perfectly, right? It was difficult. It was hard. And the meaning comes from the difficulty, right? So we shouldn't look at it as that everything is going to be meaningful all the time.
So we are well over our half an hour main segment. And so we would, as much as we would love to keep the conversation going, I'm sure you have other things to do with your lives. But before we go, we always like to go around and have everybody say one thing that they want to leave our audience with. Since Tamara, you started off, I'm going to kick this over to Wes as the first person to give, and then we'll go on to Tamara and then to Jeff.
I would say it just takes a few moments to help create meaning for someone else in your organization. And so think about some of the practices in the book, saying thank you, asking someone how their weekend was, and then paying attention, and try it and see how it goes.
And I would say, like, really a specific to kind of build on what Wes said is right now, when we hang up or when you're done watching, go ask somebody a real question. Go ask them what they're doing this weekend. Ask them what their plans are. It takes 40 seconds to build this high quality connection. It matters a lot. And what's even going to be better is if you remember what they did, and then on Monday you follow up and you say, hey, how'd it go? That thing you said you were going to do. And then you start unlocking meaning and building community.
Absolutely. Before I jump in with my one thing, we always like to ask our guests, what's the best place for people to find out more information, connect with you, etc.?
Yeah, you can go to our website at makeworkmeaningful.com, and all the information about our book and our research. And you can take an assessment there as well to see how you're doing on all three of the C's. And you can find both Tamara and I on LinkedIn, where we're very prolific.
Awesome. I am going to use my one thing takeaway to basically plug this book, because I have read it and it is really an amazing book. Not just because of it's what?
I was going to say you could hold up the book now.
It is such an interesting book. I remember when I was reading it, not just the framework, but also just the, like, I don't think I've seen I have not come across another book, maybe there's one out there, but that brings so many great sort of positive psychology kinds of concepts together in one place. And so it was like this, I'm like, wow, this is a really good book, not, as a reference to to remind me of all these other things. It just brought together so many things that I had been reading about in all these different places. And so I really appreciated the book. I definitely recommend it to anyone who wants to learn about meaningful work. And so that'll be my one thing, and I will pass it over to Elena.
So I actually want to anchor into the name of your website, Make Work Meaningful, and stress the word make, because it is up to all of us to make that and to stop and take 5 seconds to ask ourselves a question and reframe and move on with it. So that would be my take, is the importance of that make part of it.
Fantastic. The one I wasn't sure. I had written down a couple things because I was sure that somebody was going to take the one that I was going to say, but nobody did. So I'm going to bring it up, which is, I think, Tamara, you said it before. Like, if you're finding it challenging to see the meaning in your work, create meaning for other people. That is such a great concept. It was definitely something that I hope that people who used to work for me felt like I was trying to do, but it was something that I wanted to do. I wanted them to have the challenges in the community, et cetera. And I think that is really important. I also, on the flip side of that, have worked for a lot of people who did not understand that making meaning for others was something important in their job. But I really think that is really an interesting way to think about it, in addition to the 3 C's, which I probably have heard at some point in my career, but those are, having you all reminding me of it just now, if I had heard it before, those are really good. Those are really good 3 things to be thinking about on a day-to-day basis. This was a fantastic conversation. We would love to keep hearing from you guys about how things are going and with the book, et cetera. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
It was great.
Thank you.
Thanks.